What's up, nerds? Nerd! It is high noon. As I understand it, this town ain't big enough for the both of us.
Looks like you gotta go.
Okay. What's up, nerds? Goz Master here with another Magic the Gathering puzzle quest. Today's quest, it is high noon, the final spoiler card for this season before we get the pre-release of full disclosures of all of the different cards previews, and then the new set itself. As always, my gratitude and appreciation to Webcore for giving me access to this. I don't know if I like this card. I don't know if I want even to show you guys this card. First off, big shout out and appreciation to Webcore. Webcore, I really appreciate you guys giving me access to this card to be able to spotlight in advance and to preview for our folks here on the channel. But more importantly than that, I'm really grateful for being named in the card. Like, it's a really flattering thing that you guys have done. Thank you so much. It's an honor. I don't think many people will think it's fair that this card lists me the way it does, but let's go through it, shall we? Let's go through it. All right, folks. Here it is. High Noon. 15 mana. Light. 3 shield. Support card enchantment. When a player casts their first card each turn, disable each other card in that player's hand until the end of turn. Then this support loses 1 shield. When this support is destroyed or loses a reinforcement, deal 3 damage to each opposing creature. And here's the thing that really is just beautiful. Thank you so much, Webcore. Goz Master is not affected by these effects. I mean, that's flattering. That's so flattering. So I get to continue my loops and my combos, and I don't have to worry about this card impact. Why does the font look different than the rest of the fonts? I don't know. Why is the cowboy hat at the bottom cut off? Why are you asking questions like that? Fine, I photoshopped it. Here's the real card. No, Goz Master's not immune to the effects of this. But he should be. Goz Master does not like loop stoppers. Goz Master does not like having his things messed with. And this messes with Goz Master's things. I'm trying out referring to myself in third person. Goz Master's trying out referring to himself as in third person as Goz Master. How's it work? Is it working for you? I don't know. It feels weird. Goz Master does not like this at all. All right, so for those of you who've been playing the game long enough, you remember an old card called Test of Talents. Test of Talents hit the board, and it didn't allow any of your spells to gain any mana whatsoever. So you had to have specifically creatures or spells, or creatures or supports that would enter the board to be able to destroy that support. You had to match that blue gem until your spells could cast again. Very, very freaking annoying. One of the worst cards ever to face when you're a loop player like I am. Is this as bad as Test of Talents, or is this manageable and needed speed bump in the looping of what's going on in the space? High Noon, 15 mana. So when a player casts their first card each turn, so it's not just your opponent, it's everybody. Disable each other card in that player's hand until the end of turn. So essentially, play whatever you're going to play. You can play a spell, a support, a creature, and then that's it. Once that happens, the rest of your cards are no longer allowed. They're enabled on your opponent's turn, so if you have things with flash, you can still cast them, but you only get to cast 1. This support loses 1 shield. Now, here's the thing with this. This has 3 shields, so it's self-removed. As long as Greg doesn't have a deck that he's armed with that reinvigorates that support or casts more shield. This is for you players that just can't stand loopy-loop decks. Raw decks are probably going to be loopy-loops. Any kind of blue deck you're going to see is probably a loopy-loop. Or if you're a newer player and you don't have some of these other cards in Legacy, then this might be a card for you to be able to get so you can go into your Legacy events and use it to stop the Omni decks. Yes, this would stop the Omni decks. It would only get to cast 1 thing and they'd go off from there. So this could be a boon to those of you who hate going up against Omni decks and want to stop those in Platinum, but don't yet have the collection themselves. The downside to this card is it impacts you too, so you don't get to cast more than 1 spell per turn as well, and that's really not the greatest in my opinion. I don't like to play cards that limit me. I want to play cards that limit Greg. There was a card from before, I think it was the Eternal Sun, from Ixalan, the original Ixalan set. But it hit the board and it kept both Planeswalkers from being able to use their Planeswalker abilities. lame. I want to use my Planeswalker abilities. I don't want to stop it. There was with Spyglass, though, was the one where you'd put it down and it only impacted your opponent, and it would keep Greg from using his loyalty abilities, but you still got to do all your things, and it would tick down just like this, where it would lose a shield. This works much in the same way, but it impacts both sides. If you're going to limit it that way and actually have that secondary cheat for it, it shouldn't impact you, but it is what it is. This impacts both sides. So you must really hate loop decks if you're going to play this and not just limit, your opponent, Greg, from running a loop against you like that, or you're running something that plays multiple cards in a turn. You don't get to do that anymore. So that alone in itself makes it really lame to me. I don't like this card just for that. But the challenge is I know people are going to play this card in decks because they're sick of loops. They're going to play this as a spike card against me, and I'm going to see them. So anytime I see somebody playing white, I've got to anticipate they're going to have something else like this. Now, it is an enchantment, so that means that it's removable by Broker's Charm. It's removable by Invoke Despair will still work because it targets enchantments and any other support removal you have. Or, I don't know, maybe there's another support removal card that I spotlighted some time ago as a spoiler that would be able to do just all support removal. So, is this a card that's going to stop us from, is it going to correct the meta? That was really the question here. Will this card correct the meta in the way that will stop loops in a way or fashion? Here's my challenges with this card for you folks who would like to play this style of card. I don't like playing against my opponent defensively. Like, for me, 10 cards in a deck, every single card has to earn its spot. And the only thing this does, it limits my opponent, it limits me, and then in addition to that, it ticks down, so I've got to go cast another one and constantly try to keep the board replaced so that my opponent can't go off of me. I don't like playing the game that way. I like playing proactive. I like playing aggro. I like being aggressive in my builds to win or to remove threats. Combos and that kind of thing, I'd rather have flash-style reaction-placed cards or defensive cards that can get like reach or whatever and be able, and first strike and death touch to be able to stop their creatures if that's plausible. Or some type of flash removal that I can cast and untargeted that removes their creatures on my side. That's much more proactive than this, in my opinion. The second thing I don't like about it is, man, that's just too expensive. At 15 mana, I'm not getting this out to what, turn 3, 4, unless I get really lucky, get a really deep cascade, or I get a bunch of conversion. I'm limited to white with this. It's not something I play across the board in multiple ways, or in multiple deck builds, so I gotta run a white walker with this, so that's another place it's limited. And the fact that it ticks down and it impacts both of us. I mean, those are the 4 real big things. Cost is too much. It impacts both players. It ticks down, so it's actually going to self-remove on its own after a couple turns. And most importantly, I still get to cast my spells. I can cast anything I want, but I just get one. So, if I cast my spell, Broker's Charm or whatever, Invoke Despair, and I destroy this, then I get the rest of my hand. And me as a player that's running this, I lost that card slot in my deck. I lose 15 mana from casting this thing. And then finally, I lose all of that momentum in my deck build and synergy, strictly as a defensive play. So, I'll tell you, I don't think this is a very good card. No, I'm not just saying that to discourage you from playing this. I'm telling you because I think this is probably a card that is not necessarily a great way of dealing with where the current standard meta is right now. But if you're running Demolition Field will be on the board and be able to deal with this thing fairly handily. But it is a masterpiece where this is just a rare. So that's the thing. As a rare, you're probably going to see this a lot more out there. This is going to be super annoying to face if you don't have the right stuff in place to get it done. And I think it's going to be easier to deal with because of the things I've already listed here than not. So if you do face up against this, you need support removal. Whether that, if you're running an all spell deck, you better have a card like Broker's Charm in your build for as long as that stays in standard. Big fat tear down my eye because in September, October, that's going to be rotating out. So until October, we have Broker's Charm to deal with this. We have Invoke Justice or Despair to deal with this. And then you're going to have a bunch of other stuff that enters the board and takes care of it. Maybe Chat Bros can do that. There's a lot of different things to deal with this, and it is what it is. Now, final note here, I'm going to say to you newer players, if you guys are newer players and you're looking for ways to be able to compete in the old school legacy events, this actually is a chase card. The reason for that is because this can stop Greg's Omni loops from going off. Yes, it's going to limit you, but it's going to give you a much better time to deal with his threats around mid-game. So turn 4, turn 6, right? If you haven't already lost by then. Here's my criticism and feedback to you, Webcore, about this card, okay? If you wanted this to make an impact in the meta, it needs to cost half as much as this. It needs to be 7, 8 mana. And the reason I'm not trying to encourage you guys to do that, But the reason I am saying that is because if I'm using this in Legacy, if I'm a newer player and I'm trying to just start getting my foothold in Legacy events, and I have this card, I'm going to stop the Omni Loops. No, you're not, because, or it's tough to do, because at 15 mana, that's really difficult for me to cast early game. And how long do matches in Legacy events last? I would argue it's probably like by turn 6. Game's over. They're looping already. Greg's looping by then and beating you. So you have to get this card in hand. You got to store it full of mana, and then maybe turn 2 or 3, get it out. But you're doing nothing else. You're locking them down to one card per turn, and that doesn't mean that they're not going to get stuff out. Let's say by then they get deployed to play, because Greg gets stupid cascades, right? And winds up getting Angel of Destiny out on board. You're done half your life, and you've got one card you can cast per turn as a result. This limits you too. So I don't think this is a very good card. I just don't think this is a very good card. And it's going to be one of the most annoying ones we're going to face in Standard right now. But I'd love your thoughts. What do you guys think? Is this a good card? Did Webcore do a good job with this, trying to help the meta out? I personally appreciate them trying to do things. I mean, let's be honest. WotC, Wizards of the Coast, developed this card. This is a pretty close port from the paper card into MTPG. I remember reading this card and saying, "Oh man, they're gonna bring it in as Testis Talents, aren't they?" But they didn't. They didn't bring it in. They didn't port it in as challenging as Test was. You're not gonna notice it until it's on the board, until after it's stopping you and it's disabling the cards in your hand after you cast your first spell. And then you're just gonna reprioritize a card in hand to deal with it next turn, and it'll basically buy you a turn. It'll buy Greg a turn. It probably won't make much of an impact. You do have to be aware of it, but it won't be that big of a deal. Will it help newer players in Legacy? I would say there's probably more effective ways to get it done, but if you got this card, you don't have some of those other options to get it done, maybe this is a viable way for you to get started with it, but it will be very interesting to see how it really impacts the meta long term. That said, my friends, I appreciate, you could be anywhere in the world. What do you think of this card? Did Webcore get it right? Do you appreciate this? Did I miss something on the way that this is going to be able to be played that will be detrimental to the rest of the play? I don't think so, but I would love to hear your comments in the comment section below. Get into the Discord. Let us know what you think. As always, my gratitude and appreciation. Webcore, I really appreciate you guys letting me have access to these cards, to spoil these cards for our teams, and for all the people out there that are playing Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest. If this is your first time seeing me, hello, my name is Goz Master. I have a Discord server. You should jump in, where we answer all your questions. We actually help you build out your decks, and most importantly, the world's best players in the game. In the game, hanging out, talking, giving advice, feedback, and showing you what's up on how to be able to do things. So get into the Discord, get jumped in, and as always, my friends, until our next quest, it's probably going to be full spoiler reviews. Till then, my friends, swords up. Talk to you then. Bye. I really wish I had a cowboy hat for these.